All right. Hi, Ari. Hi, Jeremy. Thank you so much for joining me here today on Vonvo.com. Today's date is April 21st, 2013, and we're here to discuss Israel-Palestine. I want to go over two quick ground rules before we get our discussion started. The first is that right now this conversation is being recorded, and after the recording's completed, we'll be uploading this video to the internet to our YouTube channel. Is that okay with both of you?
Sure. It's absolutely fine.
Please send me the link.
Will do, of course. And then on top of that, here at Vonvo, we're all about our discussions staying both civil and valuable. We don't want there to be any personal attacks against one another or anyone else who's in the chat room. Are you guys fine with that?
Absolutely.
Yep, no problem.
Okay, great. So let's get our conversation started. Just for anyone who's watching in the audience, which we have a few people, would you mind just giving a quick background of yourself? Ari, you can go first, and also why you're so passionate about this subject. And then Jeremy, you can go afterwards.
Sure. My name is Ari Lieberman. I'm a lawyer. My interest in Israel developed as a youth. I've been to the country several times, probably more than 24 times. And I've written extensively on the subject. And in my opinion, I think that the peace process has been stalled due to intransigence on the part of the Palestinians. That's, from what I've seen, and from the evidence that's before me, that's what I've come to conclude, that the intransigence on the part of the Palestinians has stymied the peace process.
Great. And Jeremy?
Yes. Well, what about me is that I live in Tel Aviv now. I worked in the Knesset and the Foreign Ministry. I worked with the Likud party, with the deputy minister, Ayub Kara, at the time. He was a Druze minister. It was very interesting to work with a non-Jewish parliamentary member, as well as at the many pro-Israel advocacy and at the Foreign Ministry, as well as the Ministry of Hasbara. So between those two things, and now I've just finished my master's at Tel Aviv University in Middle East politics and history. And yes, about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I mean, as of right now, no, there really is no real concrete negotiations. The fault mainly lies with the fact that the Palestinians, are divided, and they refuse to negotiate without preconditions. So that's really the crux. Trying to stop the settlements or trying to just get the negotiations going again.
Right. So Jeremy, would you mind sort of hitting on that exact point? We wanted to discuss any sort of reasoning for why peace proposals are at a halt. Would you mind sort of giving us your overall take on that subject, and what are some of the main reasons you see, and then Ari can go right ahead and chime off of that.
Yeah, well, just for the latest update, John Kerry, the Secretary of State, is in the region right now. As of today, he's in Turkey, trying to speak to both Erdogan about the Israeli-Turkish ties, as well as Abbas, who flew into Istanbul, about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So, we know that there is now an active American approach to trying to get this back on tracks. Only time will tell. But about the current peace proposal, we're not sure what Obama has in mind. He did come to the region. He did speak to both Israelis and Palestinians about peace is the only real solution. But it must be A, tangible, and B, realistic. Israelis demand security. Palestinians demand the recognition and the territory. But as long as Israelis don't feel secure, and as long as the Palestinians can't even deliver on security, then I think the negotiations will be on a deadlock.
Ari, you can go ahead.
I would agree with what Jeremy said. I would just like to add a few more points. I think that Israel has always maintained that it will enter into negotiations with anybody willing to negotiate with it without preconditions. The Israelis have negotiated with Egypt and negotiated a peace treaty with Egypt. They negotiated with Jordan and they negotiated a peace treaty with Jordan. They are willing to negotiate without preconditions. It's the Palestinians who are attempting to impose conditions upon the Israelis before negotiations, which is unheard of. They want the Israelis to lay their cards on the line before they even begin to negotiate. Just a little brief history on the issue, because this isn't new. In 1937, for example, the Palestinians were offered 80% of mandatory Palestine in the Peel Commission in 1937. They refused it. They rejected it. And then in 1948, there was a partition plan where the Palestinians were offered roughly 50% of the country, and they refused it. And then in 1967, after the Israelis liberated the territories, the Israelis offered to negotiate land for peace, and the Arabs responded with that, with 3 no's: no negotiation, no peace, no recognition. And then again in 2000, at Camp David, Ehud Barak, the defense minister, the prime minister, offered the Palestinians, Yasser Arafat, offered him 95% of the territories, 95% of the West Bank and all of Gaza. And Arafat, not only did he not reject it, he didn't even propose a counteroffer to that. And then in 2001, at Taba, the Israelis made a similar offer, offering even more. I think it was something like 96 or 97%. And that was again rejected by the Palestinians. And then as late as 2008, 2007, I think it was, Ehud Olmert offered even more concessions that were offered at Taba. And Abbas just ignored it. He didn't even bother responding to it. So we have a series of precedent where Palestinians have refused to negotiate with Israel in good faith, and they're trying to attempt to gain unilateral concessions from Israel, which is not going to happen, and never will happen.
Jeremy, do you want to comment on any of that? You guys can feel free to go back and forth.
The Palestinians is that, we need to figure out what's... What, Max?
I was just saying, you could feel free to go back and forth and go ahead and respond.
Jeremy, you want to take it?
Okay, well, first of all, I agree fully with Ari. He's very true. There's been a constant historic, no from the Palestinians. Each time they offer them a peace proposal, sometimes even larger than what they even demand, they either turn down or they reject it, or they want, more obstacles along the way to hinder the negotiation tracks. The big question is, what exactly is their end game? Do they want, a Palestinian state of their own? Or do they want the entirety of Israel? How will they come? Do they really just want a peaceful solution, or do they want a solution that will be, filled with violence and bloodshed? I personally think the main crux for the Palestinians is that they are not united. They've always been divided. When Mahmoud Abbas goes and and tries to negotiate with the Israelis, when he is trying, Mahmoud Abbas doesn't represent the Palestinian people. The Palestinians, also have the Hamas leadership as well. Hamas is a terrorist organization that has constantly, chosen the path of war instead of the path of peace. They've also either reject both Israel and the Jewish people, both historically, culturally, and religiously. So the Palestinians have to figure out who is their true leadership. If both actually compromise with each other, which by the way they can't even seem to compromise. Abbas and Khaled, mashallah, never seem to sit down and have a joint government. And if they do compromise, they must compromise on the path of peace and not the path of warfare. I mean, just today there was one rocket that hit Israel. Compounding all these issues, by the way, is one major issue is that now in the Gaza we have terrorist organizations that don't even listen to the Hamas organization, but listen to Iran, who's their big boss. So you have this cycle of violence that doesn't seem to end. If the violence escalates, if the Hamas is not able to rein in on the terrorist organizations, we're going to have another Operation Pillar of Defense, and then we're back to square one of no negotiations, warfare in the Gaza Strip. Hopefully the West Bank won't lead to an uprising. The Palestinians feel supportive of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, which by the way there's already small symptoms with the Palestinian prisoners who are doing hunger strikes, and that leading to violence in the West Bank, them throwing rocks, Molotov cocktails, also on the Temple Mount. So the suit's calm, but it can explode any moment. So that really is I would say the big crux is what do the Palestinians want? How do they want to achieve it? And do they officially recognize the Jewish people and the land of Israel as Jewish sovereignty? And I'm not even speaking about Jerusalem and the refugee issues, which that alone is a major issue of negotiations.
Right.
Ari, want to chip in?
I concur with what Jeremy said. I think he articulated the position quite well. I just like to highlight some points that he touched on and just expand on them. Jeremy asked, "What is the Palestinian endgame?" And that's a very, very pertinent question, because what is the Palestinian endgame? What do they want? And I think the answer lies in what a Palestinian lawmaker said last year. His name is Abbas Zaki. He is a Palestinian lawmaker. He's a member of the Fatah Central Committee. And I have his quote right here. He said, the greater goal, parenthetically, of conquering all of Israel cannot be accomplished in one go. If we say that we want to wipe Israel out, come on, it's too difficult. It's not acceptable policy to say so. Don't say these things to the world. Keep it to yourself. Now, this is a Fatah Central Committee member, a high-level Fatah Central Committee member. Basically, what he's saying is our goal is not a two-state solution. Peace is not a strategic aim. Peace is a tactical aim. The first goal is to establish a base in the West Bank, to establish our territory in the West Bank. And after that, go on to conquering all of Israel. That is their goal. This is their statement. I'm not making this up. This is for all to see. Anybody can see it. It's online. He made this statement. He made this statement in Arabic. It's very important to note that when the Palestinians speak to their own audience, they say things that they don't usually or generally say to the West. And then, of course, they always try to deny it and try to explain it and then say it's out of context. But that's their endgame. Their endgame is to establish one state, an Arab state, and all of Israel. And even Hanan Ashrawi is considered to be a moderate Fatah Palestinian. She's a high-level Palestinian lawmaker. She has a blog that is funded by some Western organizations, and this blog is called Miftah. And in that blog, she published an ancient blood libel, claiming that Jews use the blood of Christians to make their matzos, their unleavened bread for Passover. She was caught on it. It was made in Arabic. The statement was made in Arabic, not in the English version, but in the Arabic version. But some bloggers were able to pick up on it. They exposed it. She had to retract it, and she apologized only after she was threatened with funds, withdrawal of funds by Westerners. They wanted an explanation from her, so she withdrew the comment with some cockamamie excuse as to why it was stated. It's also important to note that Jeremy stated that the Palestinians are divided. That's true. They are divided, which makes it very difficult for the Israelis to negotiate, because who are they supposed to negotiate with? There's two Palestinian entities right now. There's Fatah and there's Hamas, and they hate each other probably as much as they hate the Israelis. So if Israel establishes a peace agreement with Fatah, what's to say that that Hamas will agree to it? So we have a situation where we have an insincere partner, and we don't even know who the partner is.
I mean, by the way, Ari is 100% right. I want to, state something. Recently what happened. Well, first of all, if anybody wants to have proof and see the actual live footage of, Palestinian incitement against both the Jews and the state of Israel, all they have to do is you have to go on this site called Palestine Media Watch that exposes each of the hatred and the incitement that the Palestinians, clerics and the leadership, politicians say against Israel. And also the demonization against the Jewish people. When President Obama was visiting Ramallah and Abbas, we was found out after he left that Abbas had a map of what his version of peace was, which includes the whole land of Israel, and he took it down when Obama came, and just to show the world that Abbas is ready to negotiate for peace. But that, by the way, is the single one problem with the Palestinians. They tell the Western world, we'll talk to the Israeli government. We are ready to sit down and negotiate anytime. While they tell to the Arabs, in Arabic, we're ready for war. We want to destroy the land of Israel. We'll kick the Jews to the ocean. And the day that the Palestinian leadership, and I'm referring to both in Ramallah and in Gaza, realize that the Jews are here to stay, and we're not, leaving the territory anytime soon. It's also our land, our sovereign land. That is when, true peace will finally be able to be achieved. I mean, the Palestinians want the Israeli government to recognize that there's been a Palestinian atrocity, the Nakba. We can recognize it. But, the Palestinians must recognize that there has been, that the Jews have, lived in the land of Israel for thousands of years. By the way, just as old and older than the Muslims living in this territory. And so there has to be a dual form of action. One issue that I always, like to bring up to people about, the Palestinian state, is that, let's say the Palestinians were granted, their own autonomous state in the West Bank and Ramallah. That alone will not bring true peace, because once the refugees, Palestinian refugees, are, brought back to this new autonomous Palestinian state, and the world media covers the coverage, the refugees will start, when the media asks, the journalists ask the refugees, are you happy with this new Palestinian state? They will say absolutely not. Why? Because that's not their home. Their home is in Yaffo. Their home is in Haifa. Their home is in Tel Aviv. I saw that. That is another dimension the Israeli government has to take into consideration. Is the fact that there will be an international backlash. If or when the Palestinians have whatever state, and there'll be an outcry, because they want to be back in their proper homes. So that is one way. The last thing I want to mention is about the refugees. In 1948 to throughout the in the 50s, there have been two forms of refugees. I mean, there have been many forms of refugees in the Middle East, but the two significant forms in terms of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict was, yes, the Palestinians, did become refugees, and they were living in refugee camps in Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan, But there was another form of refugees also, which were the Jewish refugees from the Arab world, from Morocco to Yemen. True, not every Arab government kicked the Jews, many of them did. But the Israeli government, unlike the Muslim governments, incorporated the Jewish refugees into Israel proper, gave them proper, jobs in the end, and many of them were treated as the same form of system as, the Ashkenazi Jews, the Jews from Eastern Europe and Russia. Unlike the Arab world, which, by the way, the Palestinians living in Syria and Lebanon and Jordan are not, are not considered first-class citizens like the rest of the population. And that's another dimension to think about. It's the whole refugee issues between the Jewish refugees and the Palestinian refugees as well. Ari, you want to comment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you touched on an excellent point. I was going to raise it myself. The refugee crisis is one crisis that was created exclusively by the Arabs. And Jeremy is also correct when he says that there were two refugee crises that were the result of the 1948 war. You had an Arab refugee crisis and you had a Jewish refugee crisis. The Arabs who were refugees, the majority of them left on their own volition. They weren't expelled. The majority of them left on their own volition because the neighboring Arab countries informed them to leave because there was going to be an imminent invasion and they didn't want them in the way. And they promised them that once the Jews would be destroyed and killed, they can come back and take whatever property the Jews had left. Of course, that never materialized. The Jews ended up winning that war, thankfully. But concurrent with that refugee crisis, Arab refugee crisis, there was a Jewish refugee crisis. Now, the difference between the two refugee crises, there are a number of differences. But the first difference is how that refugee crisis materialized. Whereas the Arab refugee crisis materialized because of the Arabs themselves who left voluntarily, the Jewish refugee crisis materialized differently. They were expelled forcibly from their Arab lands. The Jews of Baghdad, for example, that was a community that was over 2,000 years old. The Jews of Baghdad preceded the Muslim rule in Baghdad. That's how old that community was. It was the time from the Babylonians. It was the time from the first temple. That's how old that community was. And they were expelled. One of every 4 people living in Baghdad was Jewish. They were expelled. Their property was taken and confiscated. They were beaten. They were raped. They were killed. And ultimately they were expelled. And the same holds true for the Jews of Egypt, the Jews of Libya, the Jews of Syria, to a large extent. These countries are now Jew-free. There's not a single Jew living in these countries. The way they were handled is also crucial different. As Jeremy pointed out, the Arabs were kept in the Arab refugees were kept in these camps in these Arab countries. They were never integrated by their own kinsmen. Their own Arab kinsmen failed to integrate them into their own societies and treated them not only as second-class citizens, but treated the Palestinian Arabs as third-class citizens. They couldn't, for example, hold work permits. They couldn't gain citizenship in those Arab countries. The Jews, on the other hand, absorbed all the refugees, absorbed them, and now they're fully integrated, irrespective of color, of race, irrespective of what they look like. They were all absorbed, and now they're fully productive and integrated into Israeli society. There's no Jewish refugees anymore. And that's something that's very important to highlight when discussing the refugee crisis. It's a big propaganda. The Palestinian side routinely uses this as a propaganda tool, but they omit very important facts, and they take a lot of things out of context, and they almost always exclusively talk about Palestinian refugees, and they never mention the Jewish refugees. And they also never mention the context in which the Palestinian refugees were left. And they also failed to mention that it wasn't the Jews who started the war, it was the Palestinians who fired the first shots in that war. And it wasn't the Jews who invaded Arab countries, it was the Arabs who invaded the Jewish country. So there's a consequence and a price to pay for aggression.
So
And that consequence in price also extends to the 1967 Six-Day War that was also started by the Arabs. And they lost territory there as well. And the Jews were able to win that war, thankfully, and they conquered territory. And the Arabs should know that there's a price for aggression. Not just the Arabs, any country that launches an attack against another country and is the aggressor should know that there's a price and consequence for aggression.
right. So I was just going to ask you guys.
By the way, I fully agree with Ari.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Jeremy. Do you hear?
No, I just want to say that I fully agree with Ari that there is a price to pay for aggression.
Right. So I was going to ask you. So in terms of like, taking sort of like to just throw out some different questions. So in terms of like a peace process for those Palestinians, let's say in like the West Bank that are feeling like they're being treated unfairly, and that for example, settlement building. So some Palestinians will throw out the idea that if Israel was serious about a peace process, why would they build exclusive only settlements on West Bank lands when that presumably would be a state for Palestinians. And so would you guys mind addressing that topic as potentially a roadblock to any sort of peace deal, and something maybe that perhaps the Israeli government is doing wrongfully, if you guys believe so? And I'm just trying to take since we don't have a Palestinian point of view in here, I'm just sort of trying to take that angle. So Jeremy, do you want to address that, and then Ari, you can follow up?
Sure, about the settlement expansion and construction.
Yeah, on West Bank land.
Yeah,
on West Bank lands.
Yes, it's very true that that the Palestinians want the Israelis to freeze all settlement building in the West Bank. They claim that it's theirs, and that they have every right to be there. But there's two different realities. One of the realities is that frankly, the settlements are great business for the Arabs, because it's the Arabs who are the workers who build the houses for the Jewish settlers. And second of all, about stopping, Jewish settlements. I think that the world has to stop pressuring Jews, and Israelis to stop building houses. I mean, historically, the world has always, told the Jews to, don't do this, don't do that. But the settlement area among the entire land of Israel is the most, historically, culturally, and religiously Jewish. Biblically, that's where the whole Jewish tribes and civilization flourished was in the West Bank. And they remained constant presence, especially in Hebron, until this very day. There's been the Palestinian massacre of, the Jewish massacres done by the Palestinians in Hebron that no one talks about. One big thing that, by the way, no one ever talks about, that everyone says that there's Palestinians, about the Palestinians, is that, Mahmoud Abbas said that in the new Palestine, there'll be no Jew allowed to live in Palestine. There's many Arabs living in Israel, getting proper education, working in Israel, having full recognition, be able to pray as long as they want, and then that is simply not the case with,
Right.
I'm not sure that would be the case under Palestinian government.
Right.
So that is another thing to think about. Does the freezing of the settlements really will get the Palestinians back onto negotiations? I don't think so. Historically, they've said no. No matter if there's a freeze or no freeze, then they'll just come up with another obstacle. Maybe it's Jerusalem, maybe it's the Mount of Refugees, maybe it's the borders. So the fact that it has to be demilitarized. The final issue that I want to mention is that one day in the future, Jordan, the whole Arab world is praying, God forbid, Jordan faces an Arab Spring, and the king is toppled, or one day is deposed, or just dies from natural causes. Jordan is significantly Palestinian. 70-80% of the population are Palestinians. When that government becomes Palestinian, what all the Palestinians say that on the East Bank they have a Palestinian state called Jordan. The West Bank they want a quasi-Palestinian state. Then on both banks there will be a Palestinian, presence. So that is another major issue to think about. Ari?
Right.
Yeah.
And just quickly, Ari, I just want to see, Hassan, are you there? Because I feel like I might hear audio coming from you now. I could be wrong though. Did either of you guys hear Hassan when you were just speaking, Jeremy? No.
Unfortunately, I don't hear him. Unfortunately,
Okay.
I would love to hear his perspective on things, but I don't hear him. I would love.
Hello.
Oh, do you hear him now?
Hear Hassan, but and I think I did hear a little
Wait.
bit from Hassan.
Hassan, can you say something
Hassan,
again?
are you
Hello.
there?
Can anyone hear me? Hello?
I hear.
I am there.
Hello,
Can
hello.
anyone hear me?
Yeah,
I think I hear him.
yeah, I hear Hassan. We hear you now. Did you want to say
I have no
something?
visual on him though.
Jeremy hears you.
Okay, can just give me idea about what you have spoken in order to start the discussion. If you
Well,
allow.
yeah. So we're just discussing.
Hello.
Yeah, Hassan, do you hear me?
Hello.
Now I feel like we hear him, but he can't hear us.
Hello.
Yeah, Hassan, I hear you.
Hello.
I can't say hello.
I hear you, Hassan. Do you hear us or no?
I mean, I say, if you can again, give me a general idea about what you have been spoken in order to start the discussion, from this point.
Right. So I was saying we're right now currently talking about the idea of settlement building and whether or not that is possibly hindering any sort of peace process from taking place because settlements are being built in some of the West Bank lands. Do you have an opinion on that you want to share with Ari and Jeremy?
Hello.
All right. Ari, do you want to comment on what Jeremy was saying? 'Cause it doesn't sound like Hassan's coming through well enough to work.
Sure. Well, first of all, I think it's ludicrous to say that settlement building is an obstacle to peace. Failing to come to the negotiating table is an obstacle to peace. The Palestinians have an obligation to their own people to negotiate without preconditions. Settlement building has nothing to do with coming to the negotiating table. Everything is subject to negotiation. Everything can be discussed. But if we're talking about obstacles to peace, let's talk about Palestinian obstacles to peace. Let's talk about the fact that their paramilitary organization exceeds the amount that was mandated under Oslo. They have something like 60,000 soldiers on their arm. Oslo permits them to have something like 20,000. Let's talk about the weapons that they're using. Oslo permits them to have AK-47s and some armored cars. But they have more than that. They have rockets. They have anti-tank weapons. They have anti-aircraft weapons. They have Fajr 5s that can hit Ashkelon. Let's talk about the incitement, the Palestinian incitement. Peace. It's easy to make peace between governments, but you also have to make peace between people. If the Palestinian street continuously hears from their own government that Jews are the descendants of apes and pigs, and this is what they say repeatedly. They refer to Jews as the descendants of apes and pigs. They refer to bloodsuckers, and worse. And they hear this on official government media, and they hear this on television shows that are geared to children, where they brainwash their kids from when they're infants. When these Palestinian kids are continuously hearing that, there's no hope for peace. So let's first stop the Palestinian incitement. let's bring down the Palestinian police force to the size that it was originally mandated under Oslo. Let's have them confiscate the weapons that are disallowed under Oslo, these Fajr 5s, these Sagar anti-tank missiles, these SAM-7 anti-aircraft missiles, and then perhaps maybe you can talk about settlement building. But settlement building has never been an obstacle to peace. It has never been an obstacle to peace when we negotiated with the Egyptians. It was never an obstacle to peace when we negotiated with the Jordanians. Suddenly now the Palestinians decide that this is an obstacle to peace. It's not an obstacle to peace. This is a tactic for Abbas to avoid negotiating with Israel. So he throws up this veil of smoke and mirrors, and he talks about settlements this and settlements that, but it has nothing to do with settlements. It's Arafat and his successor, Abbas, the intransigence, their intransigence, their rejectionist attitude, and their failure to come to the negotiations with Israel in good faith. That's the obstacle to peace, not settlements.
And by the way, there is one issue also. By the way, I fully agree with Ari. He's 100% correct. Settlements are not an obstacle to peace. One thing that people should always, think about, settlements at the end of the day are houses. Houses at the end of the day can be built and can be destroyed. Point in case, there has been many Jewish houses in the Gaza Strip. What has the Israeli government got in return? We've gotten Qassam rockets, day and night. Just ask a resident of Sderot. I'm sure that their children are not feeling very happy when that alarm goes on. Then when they hear the big boom landing on the ground, God willing, doesn't kill someone. But that is really the obstacle to peace is violence and incitement. The Palestinians have to start teaching their children to stop hating Jews, to stop the lying over the Jewish history, over the ownership of the land. They also have to recognize our rights to the holy sites, by the way, which is another key factor. I'm not sure that Mahmoud Abbas fully, acknowledges the Jewish right to worship, maybe in the cave of Machpelah, where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Jewish forefathers, were buried. I'm not even so sure if under his government the Jews would even be willing to even go pray at the Temple Mount. The Kotel, the Western Wall, let alone the Mount to which Jews are forbidden to pray, right now. That's absolutely ludicrous, I find. If the Palestinians want to negotiate in good faith, you start to negotiate, and then, through the negotiation process, all of the barriers from both the Israeli side and the Palestinian sides can all be overcome if there is a good faith. If there's no good faith and they want to hijack the negotiations, which the Palestinians seem to be wonderful at doing, then the negotiations will be dead, and by the way, and the Palestinians will suffer the most. Not the Israeli side, of the peace track. The Jews are flourishing. Israel is flourishing both economically, agriculturally, technologically. We are contributing to the world. What exactly are the Palestinians, contributing? The Arabs within Israel are both contributing to the growth of Israel, to becoming smarter, educated, working hard, being able to travel around the world. Sometimes they help Israel greatly. Sometimes they speak against Israel. But the fact is that they have the freedom of speech, and they also have the freedom of worship. Jews will not have those two basic freedoms under Palestinian territory. At the end of the day, the clock is ticking. The Palestinians sit down in good faith and speak to the Israeli government, because frankly, the world has to deal with two greater issues now than the Palestinians' quest for statehood. One is the nuclear bomb in Iran that is becoming a major issue in terms of global security. The other major issue is the meltdown of the Syrian government and potentially those chemical weapons falling into radical hands. The world is slowly losing track of the Palestinians' plight for statehood.
Right. Cliff, did you want to add something to this discussion? Did you want to add anything, if you hear me? I see you fine. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Cliff, do you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
If you click turn off camera, Cliff, if you click turn off camera, it might stream your audio a bit cleaner. And Jeremy and Ari, I just wanted to give you a quick heads up that in the next few minutes I have to run to a new discussion.
I can hear you just fine. A big hello to everybody. I just have to make a few important points. Can you guys?
Yeah, I hear you, Cliff. Go ahead.
Hear me just fine?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. The important thing is we have to really cut to the chase here. You know, we keep hearing stuff about Israeli occupation, but nobody is defining what they mean by occupation. Are they telling us the occupation of the territories that were captured in the 1967 Six-Day War? If yes, then they have a case. However, they keep quoting selective portions of the law that suits the Palestinian agenda but does not suit the Israeli agenda. Or it goes against Israel's rights. Now, they quote UN resolutions that say Israeli settlements are illegal. But then those same resolutions also say that Israel exists legally as a state. So how is it that they get to quote those selective portions, but not those portions that define Israel's rights? That's extremely troublesome. Now, they keep talking about a right of return. Well, let's look at it from a legal perspective, all right? If you look at UN Security Council Resolution 242, it talks about a just settlement of the refugee problem. It doesn't say anywhere about an actual right of return. So there's nothing in international law that says that all of these 8 million of these so-called Palestinian refugees are going to be allowed to storm right into a country that they had nothing to do with. Their great-grandfathers were thrown out of the land. So from a legal perspective, there really is no standing for this so-called right of return. Okay, that's the part I want to say. And and even when you say a just settlement of the refugee crisis, it doesn't specify whether you're talking about the Arab refugees or about the 800,000 Sephardi and Mizrahi Jews who were thrown out from the Arab world. That's the point I really wanted to make. So this selective quoting of the law really has to stop. If they want to talk about occupation, let's talk about Israel's rights also, because the same statutes of the law that say Israel is doing something wrong also defines Israel's right to exist. That's what I wanted to say.
All right, great. Thank you so much for that. And what I just wanted to say is, Ari and Jeremy, you are free to comment on anything Cliff just said. I unfortunately have to run to another discussion to start recording. So I just wanted to thank you each for your time. And there's a bunch of people that are listening inside of the chat room that might want to hear you continue speaking if you're willing to. So we're happy to have you continue speaking, and I will be in touch soon, okay?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Cliff, for joining at the last moment, and speak to you all soon.
Thank you.
You got it.